Hi, Matt. Hi, Kicker. Hi, Matt. Hi, Nate.
You got the big
Yes!
Yeah, I'm building ethos by saying hi.
Hello. Hello.
Hi, how are you? Just good evening. Good evening. Vote affirmative. Vote affirmative. Vote affirmative. Vote affirmative.
Just get right up to
Is that Benjamin? Benjamin!
It really is. You said the exact same thing.
This is a crowd right here, man. We hyped up this debate.
Miss Hall!
This is like the intellectual crowd, too.
Hey, Miss Hall.
Hi, vote affirmative. Vote affirmative.
What's up, Miss Hall?
I go through the same thing every time. I wonder if people even care. There's got to be a shorter way for me to say this is why we're doing
I get a
this. 'Cause,
Snapchat
for
for
some
the
people,
fam?
I want to have context for them.
Can I get a Snapchat for the followers?
Jake!
I strategically put you here.
Vote affirmative. Vote affirmative.
Miss Frank, Miss Stinson, vote affirmative.
Wow, this is
We're building ethos.
math department here watching. It's so good. You have the whole math department here watching. That's pressure.
Yeah,
We got
and
what?
mathematicians are limited, so
What?
Yeah,
no correlation.
I think they're more. I would think they're more conservative because they're driven by numbers and strict hardcore.
Was that? Yeah. You're right.
All right, if everybody's pretty much here, there might be some people filtering in over the next couple of minutes, but we'll get started here. To spare anybody who heard all of this for the last debate that just concluded about 10 minutes ago, just to give everybody a context of what this is all about. So these students this year spent the entire year taking a debate class that's through the University of Pittsburgh. It's called CHS Debate. And we're really the only school that's not in Pittsburgh that offers this course. For the most part, every school that offers this course is in Pittsburgh. But in any event, the university gives all of the schools taking this kind of like an umbrella topic every year that they've got to debate one time. And this year, that umbrella topic was social and mass media improve the quality of democratic decision-making. And what you're supposed to do is debate this in what they call a school-wide debate. And obviously, this is ours now. It takes place in front of anybody from this school who wants to be here. And then we'll send the videos of these debates into the University of Pittsburgh. They will be evaluated by teachers and debaters and students. And then from every school that takes this course, they choose one arguer to go at the end of April, the beginning of May, to a great big statewide debate that they have at the University of Pittsburgh. So that's what this is leading to. However, rather than debating the same topic over and over again for every audience, rather than debating whether social or mass media improves democratic decision-making for everybody, we come up with sort of like some topics that touch on this, and that's where we are right now. So the debate we're going to hear right now is whether or not news organizations are trustworthy, and it's up top here, and I think you guys are the pro side. So we have Brayton and Sawyer on the pro side of this saying that news organizations are trustworthy, and we have Adam and Jared on this side saying that they're not.
Good afternoon, everybody. I would first like to start off thanking all the teachers for letting their students come here and observe the debates. I'd like to thank my opponents, Jared and Adam, for being prepared and ready for this debate, and all the other debate students for looking very nice today for your debate, so thank you. Today, my partner and I, Brayton, will provide points for the affirmative side of news organizations are trustworthy. To begin, I'd like to define trustworthy as able to be relied on as truthful, according to the Oxford English Dictionary. We live in a highly partisan time. Put this together with the fact that our society is very technologically advanced, and some issues may arise on that front. Today, there are countless amounts of news outlets, and each puts their unique spin on stories they report. Undoubtedly, our opponent will debate that these organizations put a political bias on these news outlets and supposedly move the arrow of trust off of the news itself. With that being said, Brayton and I disagree. This bias may exist, however, it exists everywhere you go, whether it is a teacher that you have in class or a movie that you watch. Any political agenda or bias will exist in some form or another. For our opponents to say this bias throws away any trust with the media is completely out of line and incorrect. The entire anti-media movement was largely started by Donald Trump himself during his campaign for the presidency in 2016. Now a large percentage of Americans, right-wing-minded conservatives especially, believe that not only is the news fake and untrustworthy, but even that it is out to get them. According to an article titled "Why Do Americans Distrust the Media" by The Atlantic, a large movement against the mainstream media began with Donald Trump contesting news surfacing against himself. So this raises the question, are people just going to distrust the media because one person says to distrust it? Luckily, another article written recently titled "Majority of Americans Trust Media Over Trump" by the Christian Science Monitor says 52% of Americans still believe the media over the rants of President Donald Trump. Although this is a small percentage, there are still people that see the news as truthful, and this protects the constitutional right to the freedom of the press. To state again in plain terms, trust can exist with biases, whether it is our school newspaper writing about a girls' basketball game or a larger organization such as Fox News. Our human ways will provide some sort of bias into the ways we think. With such an immense number of news outlets today, from MSNBC to Breitbart, it is more or less statistically impossible for these news sources to report the same interpretation of the news. That being an obvious truth because of this fact that a single word can change the way one interprets an article. The only way to filter the mass media into reporting the exact same stories would be to have a third-party source saying, "You must say this," which is without a doubt encroachment not only on the freedom of the presses, but on the freedom of thought and speech itself. It is very dangerous for our opponents to contest the validity of our news organizations. For them to say news stories are false or wrong is to completely upend or derail the entire news system itself. With this distrust and lack of value of the system, what is stopping a group from hailing a story against their own political affiliation as fake news? Eventually, this distrust will lead us to a point where major news stories on weather is even deemed fake, or even stories on sports. This debate doesn't 100% stay in the political news, but rather all fields of reporting. So to say this threatens the very idea of mass media and their right to provide to the people, my people, Brayton, will continue the topic at hand. Thank you.
We get information from these places every single day, but did you know they are untrustworthy? I'm sure you've heard about news organizations doing something that can be untrustworthy. Before I begin, there are two definitions I want to read to you to help you understand this debate. First, if someone or something is trustworthy, they are able to be relied on as honest or truthful. If someone lies or even stretches the truth, they can be considered untrustworthy. The other word that you will hear a lot in this debate is bias. Bias is prejudice in favor of or against one thing, person, or group compared with another, usually in a way considered to be unfair. Let me repeat that last part. Usually in a way to be considered unfair. You see bias in every major news organization like CNN, Fox, MSNBC, and the list goes on. My partner and I believe that news organizations are untrustworthy. Jared will later explain how biases make news organizations untrustworthy, as well as explain how most American citizens find news organizations untrustworthy. To start, I want to take you back to a presidential debate. None of the candidates were to know of any of the questions that were going to be asked. CNN, which is generally viewed as a liberal news organization, gave a potential question to Hillary Clinton when they weren't supposed to. According to an article titled "With Question Leaking, CNN Has a Scandal on Its Hand" on the Washington Post, someone who worked for CNN emailed Hillary possible debate questions for an upcoming debate. An untrustworthy news organization did this because they weren't supposed to do that. Another example of a news organization being untrustworthy is when Reuters photoshopped a picture of bomb smoke in a picture from Beirut. They are not being honest with the picture, trying to make it look worse than what it actually is. So they're being untrustworthy by lying to the public. Finally, Daily News photoshopped a picture from the Boston bombing. How does photoshopping make a news organization untrustworthy? Well, according to the ethics code from the National Press Photographers Association, professional society, editing should maintain the integrity of the photographic image's content and context, and they cannot manipulate images in any way that can mislead viewers or misrepresent subjects. Our opponents will try to tell you that being biased is different than being untrustworthy, but my partner will explain how both these go hand in hand. Our opponents will also try to say that not all news sites and organizations are untrustworthy, which we agree with. The BA Blueprint could be considered a trustworthy source. However, most major news organizations are untrustworthy because of their biases in politics. For the rest of the debate, I encourage you to listen to both sides of this debate. Listen closely to the arguments my partner and our opponents lay out. I hope you see that the media is untrustworthy. Thank you.
Hello, Adam.
How you doing, man?
I'd like to start off with a question about your comment about the multiple photos being photoshopped.
Yeah.
Does it not improve your opinion of news outlets, judging by the sheer fact that you know that those were photoshopped, meaning that one other news organization was responsible and truthful enough to report that it was photoshopped?
Well, you see, these news organizations that put these photos out did not let the media know that these were photoshopped. And so why did they Photoshop them? Like, if they're going to Photoshop them, at least tell the public, like, we made this photo look worse than it is. That's not being trustworthy with the public by not telling them the truth. They're practically lying to them. Would you agree? By Photoshopping a picture to make it look worse than it actually is?
I would just have to deflect that question by asking, with the smoking, the cloud of the smoke, was there smoke present in the air, yes or no?
Yes, but they made it look a lot darker. They made it look like there was a lot more bombs dropped in this area.
But was it smoking in the air, yes or no?
Yes, it was. I said that, but still, you're lying to the media, or you're lying to the public by making a picture look worse than it is.
But does improving for their own political bias necessarily, pushing for their own political agenda necessarily mean it's not truthful?
Yes, because you're lying to the public. Whenever you make something look worse than it is, that's lying.
Okay, disagree there. Second question. What stops someone from getting another news source if they see a specific news source as unfair, as you said?
Nothing stops them.
Okay, so what is deemed fair or unfair?
What do you mean by that?
What is fair or unfair news?
Whatever's actually honest and fair news, there's no really determination, because no one really knows what is real news and what is fake news anymore because of all this.
So my question is, with the certain amount of bias that will be present, because it's everywhere, your definition of bias included the word unfairness.
Yeah.
So who is to say what level of unfairness or fairness is a problem in news, and how would you decide?
I just want to say that's not really part of the debate. The debate's about trustworthiness, and so unfairness really doesn't have anything to do with trustworthiness. But so, like, about these pictures, how can you say that it's not lying to the public whenever someone changes a picture and doesn't tell them about it?
I would say that pushing for your own political agenda and adding to a fact that is already present, it happened or it didn't happen, doesn't necessarily mean that you are not truthful.
So they're stretching the truth, though. They're manipulating facts.
I would just like to bring up an example. When O.J. Simpson was put on trial, Time magazine darkened his skin color, but you can't deny the fact that just because the picture was doctored, does that mean that he was on trial or he was arrested, yes or no?
That doesn't matter. Why are they trying to change the subject? Why don't they just put it out there?
It could
the
be
same?
pushing for their own political agenda. That doesn't necessarily mean.
So they are,
it's
but
untrustworthy.
whenever they push for their own political agenda, they're lying to the public by doing so.
Are they lying, or are they just pushing for their own?
Whenever they stretch the truth and whenever they Photoshop pictures, I'd consider that lying.
Okay.
Mr. Naylor. Hi, everybody. I'd like to thank you for coming out and watching this debate. First off, I'd just like to start by reiterating a point made earlier by my partner. Bias and trust can exist at the same time. According to the English Oxford Dictionary, trustworthy can be defined as able to be relied upon, as truthful. Our opponents will try to say that media is too biased to be trustworthy, but that is incorrect. What they need to realize is that bias exists literally everywhere. Right now you might be thinking, well, what about numbers, statistics? There's no bias in that, right? And inherently so, there is no bias in numbers and statistics. But what you need to be aware of is that anything that involves human interpretation, by default, involves bias. Therefore, how you interpret these numbers and what numbers you choose to include in your data is biased. When you realize the scope of bias, you realize that it is not some terrible thing done intentionally to discredit or dismiss ideas. It should not make you lose trust in a source. You should just be aware of it and how it could affect the interpretation, not only on the reporter's end, but on your own as well. Think of it this way. I would bet that everybody in here has some sort of parent, guardian, or other respected figure that they have a lot of trust in. According to them, you should have no trust in them because that figure has their own beliefs and therefore has bias. That doesn't make a lot of sense to me. When it comes down to it, news sources report facts. I bet right now you can Google a quote of something President Donald Trump has said, and you can very easily find two different articles about it. Both of these articles are reporting the exact same fact, the quote. It's just that one may have a differing opinion on what he said. Think of it this way. Say we're back in football season, and the Steelers play the Ravens. They win, obviously, but it might be a little tight. Say it's 24-21. The newspaper headlines and Pittsburgh are both going to report the exact same facts. They'll report the same score, the same passer rating, the same rushing yards. Everything's going to be reported the same. The only difference is that the paper in Pittsburgh might be a little happier about the win than the paper in Baltimore. By their definition of trustworthy, nothing is trustworthy because, as I previously said, everything touched by a human includes bias. It is impossible to write about anything you are passionate about and not include any type of opinion in it at all. That is just a flaw of the human. We are not robots. To expect any human being to pick up a pen and write an article free of bias would be to ignore the fundamental traits that make us human. I think you should try to realize that news organizations are not some big monstrosity intentionally trying to lie to the people. They're just a group of human beings like us, and they have emotions and opinions. Everybody has beliefs, and nothing can stop these beliefs from coming out, no matter how hard you try. Thank you.
I would like to begin by thanking all of you here today for listening to this debate. I would like to thank Mr. Naylor for having this class, my opponents for participating, and my partner for all the work he put in. Now, I would like to reaffirm the idea that news organizations are not trustworthy. My opponents have admitted that news organizations are biased and then attempted to say that that does not mean they are untrustworthy. And in essence, at first you may think this is correct because bias in itself does exist everywhere and is not inherently untrustworthy. However, news organizations often use bias that leads to manipulation of facts, which is then lying and therefore untrustworthy. Now, I'd like to provide an example for this. Say my good friend Bowers is running for political office against, say, Sawyer. I'm going to be the media in this case. Now, I like Bowers, and Coover comes to me to ask me about facts about Bowers and about Sawyer to get his opinion on who he should vote for. I tell him all kinds of good things about Bowers, neglecting to mention anything that's bad, and I mention a few out-of-context things that Sawyer may have said that makes him look awful. Now, that is distortion of the facts, and therefore you cannot trust me at that point. And this is what media organizations do. For example, during the news elections, or the presidential elections, the news often looked at quotes of Trump's and then wouldn't give you the full scenario in which they said, as well as Hillary Clinton, that the bias is just determining on which side you come down. However, due to the bias, you are manipulating facts and therefore lying to the public. So if they're lying to the public by manipulating facts, they are not telling the whole truth. And in the words of Ben Franklin, a half-truth is often a great lie. So therefore, they are not telling the truth and not trustworthy because they are telling half-truths that have been manipulated. Now I'd like to move on to my second point, and that is that the American public already knows and believes that the news organizations are not trustworthy. The article, "Americans' Trust in the News Media Sinks to an All-Time Low," showed that a Gallup poll proved that nearly 70% of Americans do not consider the American news media trustworthy. This was further elaborated on by the article, "Here are the most and least trusted news outlets in America," which detailed that only 14% of conservatives trust a news site like CNN. Now, this does not necessarily instantly say, oh, well, they're wrong. But see, you have to think, if 70% of Americans, a very large majority of the population, believe something, they're not just believing that for no reason. There's clearly background and reason for them to think that the news sources are not trustworthy, and this comes back to where bias comes from. See, the biases that the news organizations have while pushing their political agendas leads them to manipulate facts and distort the truths that they tell the American public. This was seen by their manipulation of photos. And yes, the facts are still there, but once you manipulate the facts, you're not telling the whole truth. And as once again, Ben Franklin said, half a truth is often a great lie. So therefore, we cannot believe that the news outlets are trustworthy. Thank you.
Let me know when we're good, Mr. Naylor. Okay, I'd like to start off by asking you a question. So, you cited multiple polls taken that were reported by news organizations. Therefore, if all news is biased and therefore untrustworthy, how can you say that the polls that you cited are credible?
Okay, so even if they aren't credible, then you're just proving our point that they're untrustworthy. However,
No, if
then,
they're credible, you're proving our
well,
point
no,
that it's
this is a
trustworthy.
paradox here. You're either proving the poll right, this is a paradox here. You're either proving the poll right, proving that the media is untrustworthy, or you're proving it wrong, proving that the media is untrustworthy.
Yeah, but I'm saying, why would you even use those polls and statistics if you didn't believe that that would be trustworthy?
Well, because, okay, again, news is untrustworthy. It's that
So
simple.
why do you put any trust in the polls that you
Well,
just
okay, a
said?
Gallup poll comes from American people voting on it anyway.
Well, news organizations publish polls that come from American people voting on it.
News organizations also have anchors that talk about things and demonstrate their beliefs. So I want to ask you a question. If a news anchor decides, like, they're obviously a liberal person, and they word something about a candidate differently than how it really is that not manipulating the public?
Well, that depends. Could you give me a specific example? Like, would you want to use the example for these two again?
Yeah,
maybe?
say, like Bowers, I just completely deny the fact that he takes big money donations.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't mention that because I know the person I'm talking to doesn't like that. So what about that?
Well, that depends. Is everything you said truthful?
Well, no.
Well, what did you say?
Okay,
that was
actually, well, yes.
untruthful?
Everything
So
I
everything you said is truthful,
But it's not the
therefore,
whole truth.
by the definition...
But it's not the whole truth. Therefore, it is not technically truthful.
But is everything that you said a fact?
Yes. But
Then
just because
therefore,
you say,
by definition, it is, quote, able to be relied upon as truthful, which is trustworthy.
no, because it's not the whole, every single fact, and it's been manipulated.
That's like somebody coming to me and say, hey, how many yards did Bell get on that one play? And I say 24, but I don't bring up the fact that, like, oh, it was a penalty the play before, and it was 3rd and 11. Like, sure, I left out facts, but that doesn't make what I said untruthful.
But it's not the whole truth. Don't the public say Bell gets 24 yards, but there was a penalty that just wasn't called. Did he shouldn't the public see something like that? And again, correct?
Well, the penalty wasn't called, therefore it probably wasn't a penalty.
Well, I think we can all agree that there are plenty of instances where penalties are not called as a football player.
Okay. Well, let's just bring it back here. I have another question. So Is what you're saying not a little bit dangerous, don't you think? Because if you're saying that we can't trust any new news organizations, who can we trust?
Well, you have to look into multiple options and then look through the facts that are there and make your own decisions. You have to trust yourself. And to do that, you have to be educated in media literacy.
But who
and
else reports facts besides news organizations?
Well, again,
Therefore, you have to put your truth in maybe not every news organization, but at least some of them.
no, see, yes, like you guys have admitted, the facts are there, but then they've been manipulated by the news source. So don't you think that a person can look at that, get the facts, and then have to see where the media is no longer trustworthy and just decipher what is actually the fact?
Well, I think they only report facts, so.
I don't think that's true. I think there are plenty of examples where they report opinions.
Could-
All right, we got to move on to the grand
Question. Most of your argument stems from right-wing ideology against the news. So is the news really the issue, or is it a certain faction's political agenda?
Yeah, just to add to what he said, like, you said that it's becomes biased and untrustworthy when they give their opinion. So I think you guys are giving an opinion that it's untrustworthy. So therefore, you're just proving our fact.
Well, I'm going to answer Sora's question. Most of the right-wing ideology, first of all, those pictures I said, that has nothing to do with the right-wing, left-wing. And you say that and then he said in that crossfire, they only present facts. Yeah, that is a fact that there was smoke there. But whenever they change the photo and make the smoke darker and thicker, that changes the fact into a lie. Would you agree with that?
I would not agree. My source of the
How
question.
can't you agree that whenever someone changes a photo, that photo becomes a lie, pretty much?
Like I said in both of our speaking, Braden could support me here. Bias is present everywhere. And
This has nothing to do with bias. This has to do with changing a picture.
It definitely has everything to do with bias, because bias is everywhere, Adam.
How's this specific picture have to do with bias, though?
Well, I would point out, to answer your original question about the pictures, that if you are saying that that picture is photoshopped, you obviously got that information from a different, more trusted news source. Therefore, there is at least one, although I would say the majority by far, but there's at least one news source that you trust to give you the correct information.
This is about news organizations in general. So if you prove...
Which I
just
said the
because
majority.
So there's still a couple.
So
there's still a couple untrustworthy ones, right?
There may
So you just proved our point. Thanks.
Yeah, thanks. You just admitted that there was an untrustworthy one and then a trustworthy one. That still proves our point that news organizations are untrustworthy in general.
Well, that might have just been one reporter not doing what he was fired after that, right? So that was just one news reporter misreporting something.
Hold on, before you go on, the one Daily News one, the one person who pointed out that it was photoshopped about the Boston Marathon, he was actually fired for pointing out that it was photoshopped. So
My question is, does one bad employee represent the whole of the news organization?
Well, like he just said, the one that did it was not fired, and the one that tried to point it out was fired. So I think that organization definitely does support manipulation of the photographs.
Okay, to backpedal to my question originally, came off the fact that 70% of conservatives don't agree with a largely liberal-based news site, CNN. So to reiterate my own question there, is it an issue of the news that they're reporting, or is it an opinionated defense of another opinion against the CNN news site?
Yeah,
Thank
there
you.
are plenty of liberals that find it not fair either, too. Like, there are plenty of liberals that look at Fox News and say it's not truthful either.
So one thing that I think I would like to keep reiterating is the definition of trustworthy, which is just able to be relied upon as truthful. And I think, how can you argue that what they're saying is completely untruthful? Like, even if you're saying they're leaving out facts, how did you know they're leaving out facts?
Because they're leaving out facts.
But who told you are you just some omnipotent being who knew they were leaving out facts? Somebody had to report it to you. Wait, just let me finish.
If you look at, like, say, CNN puts a quote on Trump, like, about all Mexicans are rapists.
Yeah.
They didn't provide the full quote of him saying all illegal immigrant Mexicans are rapists.
But did
so
he?
they're leaving that part out, and it's making him look worse than what he actually is.
Manipulating the truth and not telling you. They're manipulating the facts and not giving you the whole truth.
But did he say that or not?
What?
Did he say it or not?
He said that part, but he also said it was within another part. And just because he said that part doesn't mean that truly represents the entire idea of what he said.
Okay, so let me ask you this question. You've provided 2 examples of photoshopping photos, but right now as we speak on hundreds of different news sources, there is news running around the clock from stories that happen from now, and it's constant. So does 2 news stories really make the 2 corrupted news stories, you could say, really define the news media as untrustworthy? Because I'm pretty sure that thousands of stories are coming out right now that are true.
We may have only provided 2 examples, but I think once 2 examples have been provided, you can clearly infer that it's been happening in other times.
But if these news sources are so untrustworthy, does that mean if ABC is reporting that there's a major snowstorm moving towards the northeast right now, that is fraudulent?
Not necessarily, because you can be untrustworthy while telling the truth sometimes, but once you lie a few times, can you really be relied upon?
So what you're saying is,
All right, we're good? Okay. Now that we've heard both sides of the debate, I hope our narrative rings true to you. I hope that my colleague Brayton did a good job reiterating the ideas that bias can coexist with trust. The whole idea of bias comes from the very nature of humans. This bias is present at every television channel, especially the news outlets. My answer to everyone who says that the news is biased: find an outlet whose political biases align with your preferences. However, you will miss out on other important perspectives that many outlets provide, and which provide for the spread of knowledge. With the amount of media outlets available, there is ample opportunity for all viewers to appease their own opinions and views. But now that I have said that, I must ask the following. Are their weather reports wrong? Are the sports scores that are reported wrong? The very bottom line of this debate, the golden question, is this. When a news organization reports something, did it happen or did it not?
Now that we're here, I hope that you can all see inside with me and Bowers that news organizations are not trustworthy. And for one reason is that they even admitted that some are not trustworthy, and it doesn't matter if one's trustworthy, if another's not trustworthy, you have to agree that news organizations as a whole are not trustworthy. And another thing is they've tried saying that everything has bias and that just because there's a bias, it's not a lie, and just because the fact is there, no matter what, it's true. But once you've manipulated a fact, it's no longer the truth. I mean, no matter what, something may start as a fact and then just end up a lie, flat out, because you keep manipulating it and changing it and distorting it to your own bias. Also, I just want to point out that we also provided 2 examples that of straight up news organizations lying. Don't you think that if it happened twice that we caught, it can happen many other times that we haven't caught? And also, they even and then they tried saying, well, just because one employee did something wrong, but we provide the one example where The employee that did something wrong and manipulated that picture was not fired, received no punishment, and then the person that pointed out that it had been faked was fired. So clearly that news organization is attempting to cover up their distortion of the facts, and like I've said, distortion of the facts is not true. Once you're telling a half-truth, you're telling a lie, all right? Like, no matter what, even if it's partially true, once you've distorted it, once you've changed the meaning of it, to some degree, it's not the truth, it is a lie. And therefore, if news organizations are spreading lies, you cannot say that they are trustworthy. Thank you.
All right, so we did this the last time here. We took a little vote at the end. So with the topic being that news organizations are trustworthy, just by a show of hands, how many people would side with the pro side over here? They feel like they won this debate and they've showed you that news organizations are trustworthy. It might be more than you thought you were going to get whenever you got this topic. And then how many people would side with this side that says that news organizations are not trustworthy? Some strong points made on both ends, but that does it for this one. I think there's probably about 3 or 4 minutes left in the period. I mean, everybody's welcome to stay here and sit and wait for the bell to ring. But thanks for being such a great audience, and hopefully the rest of you can keep coming down throughout the rest of the day. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
I'm just going to bask in my glory up here.